We'd now like to return to today's theme of media literacy and disinformation. At this time, I'd like to introduce you to Martina Chapman, who will moderate our discussion panel. Martina is coordinator of Media Literacy Ireland, and this is facilitated by the Broadcasting Authority of Ireland. Media Literacy Ireland is an independent association of members committed to the promotion of media literacy across Ireland. So I'll hand you over now to Martina, who will introduce you to our panelists.
Thanks very much, John. I'm delighted to be here this morning and to be joined with four great panelists. I think we'll have a great discussion. We're going to spend the next 45 minutes or so talking about media literacy and disinformation. And I think Eileen really set the stage brilliantly for us with her keynote. And I'd like to echo what Eileen said in terms of the language that certainly I'll be using. You know, disinformation is really complex. It's a big and thorny issue. And media literacy is also similarly quite a broad concept. And there's lots of different ways of kind of describing it. So similar to Eileen, I'm going to just use the term media literacy and disinformation as a kind of catch-all for those two areas. It'll just keep it simpler, I think. I've got lots of questions for our panelists, but we would love to hear your questions as well. So please do submit your questions using the hop-in system, and I'll do my very best to get to them, but I will make my apologies in advance in case I don't get to everybody's question. So we're going to start off. I'm going to do a quick introduction around the room. We've got Fiona Brosnan and Joanna Moynihan, and they are both transition year students from the Presentation Secondary School in Church Street in Castleisland in County Kerry. And particular thanks to Fiona and Joanna for donning the school uniform and representing the school on a Saturday morning, which seems particularly cruel, but there you go. So thank you for that. And we'll come to, I've got some questions for Joanna and Fiona first. We've also got Conor Gallagher here. Conor's a journalist he's the crime correspondent with the Irish Times. I'm very pleased to have Conor here to give that really important perspective of the journalist. And absolutely not least, is Vicki Malcolm. And Vicki teaches German, French and European studies at the King's Hospital School in Palmerstown in Dublin. And she was also awarded the eTwinner and eTwinning Ambassador and Erasmus Plus project leader, and is the senior ambassador for the European Parliament Ambassador School Programme. So no better woman, I think, to represent eTwinning and to represent teachers in this discussion as well. So I'm going to come to Fiona and Joanna first. And girls, if you don't mind, I'm going to direct the question at you both, and then you can just decide how to respond yourselves. And the first question I have for you is, you know, we heard Eileen talking about disinformation. Do you think most young people are concerned about false information or about disinformation? And if you do, why do you think that is? Or if you don't, why do you think that is as well? So who wants to? Think somebody might be on mute there. Okay, Joanna is on mute. Joanna, do you want to take?
Is it working?
There we go. Perfect. Sorry. Now we go.
Thanks.
Yeah.
So me and Fiona, we don't think that the vast majority of teenagers are overly concerned about disinformation. It's not purposeful ignorance or anything, because every teenager knows it exists and everyone knows it is widespread. But I think every teenager, probably us included, has this little perception in their own heads that they are immune to disinformation, or at least immune to believing it. Like, we all like to think that we're too smart for it.
False information as well. I think it. Sorry.
That's fine. Do you want to add something there, Fiona?
Yeah. Sorry. Perfect. I think as well that false information accumulates at such a slow and steady rate that we can barely see the connection between what it is and what it can cause. Over time, it can build up and cause social unrest, and it has done so. but we aren't able to link that back to a 15-second TikTok video, and we aren't able to directly link that back to an immediate effect. So I think the mindset of a lot of teenagers is, I don't believe false information that I see online, but even if I did, it would just be me believing a video on the internet. It's no big deal, because there's usually no immediate impact. It's a chain reaction, and we don't see the part where it spreads and we can't trace it. And I think that's the problem. I think that's why teenagers aren't as concerned as they should be. It's like some politicians with climate change. Something that isn't affecting us right now doesn't really seem urgent enough to warrant a big change in our behaviour.
Both those points are absolutely spot on. I think most people, irrespective of what age we all are, we all think we're too smart to be affected by disinformation. And I think your analogy there with climate change is really good, because I think it is an issue. It's so big and so sprawling. It feels like it's too big for any one of us, individuals, maybe to address. So, picking up on that, what do you think when I say we, I mean we as a media literacy community, we as teachers, we as journalists, we as society, what do you think we could do to help young people develop the skills to recognise and to manage disinformation?
So we feel that the most important step that we can take to make teenagers be more cautious of disinformation and its dangers is to make them care. That is something that we have discussed a lot, both in preparation for today and in the WebWise Youth panel. And we've concluded that we need young people to want to develop skills needed to recognise and manage false information in order for them to be effective. So we think the first step has to be spreading awareness on a large scale, not fear-mongering or anything, but show patterns and show facts and show enough evidence that young people are concerned. And once we have young people on board, we have most young people caring about the topic, then we can progress rapidly. Once we set our minds to something as a collective, we are a driving force for change, and this is powerful, and we must take advantage of this while we can. The first initiative that we feel needs to be introduced is earlier intervention. People are starting to get devices younger and younger, so we just feel that plans need to be put in place to prepare them for the future. And going forward, disinformation will affect you both before secondary school, after, all through your life. And teaching 13 and 14-year-olds is not going to cut it anymore. And we need to educate people in primary school about disinformation and its dangers. We need to give them skills to manage information they receive online before they've already begun to practice online habits. One skills method that we recommend is SHEEP. This is an acronym, not the animal. So we just have worked out, I think it's SHEEP, and basically the S stands for source. Obviously check the sources. Is it factual? What's their motive? The next piece is history. Does this news article that you're reading, do they have a history of spreading false or misleading information, or are they reliable? The next one is evidence. Is it realistically, is it factual? You just have to think yourself, does it make sense? Emotion, what are they trying to achieve by putting this out there? What are they trying to achieve through posting this article? If it's false, why would they feel the need to do that? And the last bit is pictures. Pictures, often people find if there's a picture, that means it has to be true. But pictures can be altered, so easy to edit, anything. So just really to be cautious. But that's just a way of just for yourself, just to have it. It just helps you it simplifies it really. Because if you have it all together in one, then you can work out for yourself what's real and what's fake.
That's excellent. I can tell you straight off, I will be using SHEEP in the future. I think that is absolutely brilliant. Did you guys just come up with that as you were preparing for this panel discussion?
Yeah, we were trying to find ways to make it easier to explain.
That's excellent. Well done. Fiona, do you have anything to add there before I move on to the next question?
No, just that it can be used for anything really. You could Joanna has pet sheep, so that was kind of our inspiration. But you could use that from an Instagram post to writing a college essay. Do they rely on emotion to make their piece and history? It's just, I think it's for all ages as well, because sheep is an easy one to remember, I think.
Yeah, and I think having the E in there for emotion is really, really important, because as Eileen was saying, that's a key factor to consider as well. So brilliant. Yes, I'll be in touch with you after that to make sure that, we're able to use that within Media Literacy Ireland. One last question for you before I move on. Eileen talked about disinformation in particular being a kind of a whole of society problem. And bearing that in mind, I'm just curious as to what role you think young people might have in helping other people, whether it's parents or grandparents or maybe even teachers, recognize and manage disinformation.
I think all three of those questions are really symbiotic in a way, because once young people care and once young people are educated, they will spread the information around. It's almost ironic because that was kind of the issue in the first place. So we think that learning from your peers is one of the most effective ways to learn. Secondary schools can link with primary schools to spread awareness on the topic, and there are countless resources available to counteract disinformation. In school ourselves, we've been showing year groups videos by Webwise on the topic. Once people are invested in the issue, they will want to teach others and help others. And nowadays too, it's young people that hold the most knowledge when it comes to technology. With being part of the digital age and all that, it comes naturally, I think. And that's why the skills taught to young people can be taught by young people to their parents and their grandparents. They're simple skills, so not to keep bringing up the sheep, but the sheep, it's not complicated or difficult. And the only disadvantage to using these skills, it takes a bit more time. And that's just the sacrifice we're going to have to make if we want to make disinformation irrelevant.
Another great point. Joanna, do you have anything to add there before I move on to Connor?
No, just agreeing with Fiona. I think if people realise the problem, well, then they can make efforts to change it. The problem at the minute is that a lot of people don't feel like it's directly affecting them, so they aren't overly worried about it. So, I mean, if you just show them proof, show them evidence, or just show them how it relates back to them in their own lives, then, might help them care, make them more aware of it, so that we can progress and kind of put the whole issue of disinformation behind us in life.
Terrific. Fiona and Joanna, thank you very much. I feel inspired this morning having talked to you. So and I have to say, I don't often feel inspired when we're talking about media literacy and disinformation. So thank you very much for that. Connor, that's a hard act to follow, but we're going to come to you next. As a journalist, what concerns you most about the current climate of disinformation, or as sometimes we call it, the information crisis?
I suppose the speed at which it spreads is the most concerning thing. So it's and that's something that's just gotten worse in the last year, I think. That as a journalist, before you've even put on your shoes in the morning and a story's breaking, there's already misinformation spreading around the internet and spreading around WhatsApp groups hours before you're able to get a story out there online, and many hours before you can get it into the paper. So I suppose, just with reference to maybe an example is we had a fatal shooting in late December there of a young black man called George Nkensho in Dublin, and he was shot by the police outside his home. And very quickly, the online debate was about whether the Gardaí were justified in shooting him or not, because he had a knife at the time. And very quickly it went to a racist place as well in some forums. So you had this information spreading around that, for example, that he had lots of previous convictions for violence, and you had fake pictures of injuries he allegedly caused to a shopkeeper prior to the shooting. And those things about the allegations about the previous convictions turned out not be true at all, and the picture turned out to be related to a completely unconnected event in England of an unconnected victim. But that information was all over the internet before we could even, write a story. So then you're kind of fighting an uphill battle to kind of debunk this information while trying to do your standard reporting. So it becomes quite a time sink as well. I suppose as well, the way disinformation can worm its way into normally intelligent, smart, well-read people, as the girls were saying, we all like to think we're immune to it. But I've been surprised so many times in the last couple of years when I'm you'd be chatting to someone casually and they would bring up this blatantly false information that, I would know well is false, but they wouldn't know it. And they saw it on a Facebook post or a WhatsApp message that's going around and would believe it fully because they trust the person who sent it to them. And, sometimes it can be quite hard to convince them that what they're saying isn't true. I think you maybe saw a lot of that in America in the run up to the presidential election and even after it. You had a lot of people just believing outright nonsense and refused to be dissuaded of any of it, no matter how much evidence there was to the contrary. So yeah, they'd be my main concerns, Martina.
Yeah, it's a very fair point. I mean, I think it was Mark Twain who said, a lie will be halfway around the world before the truth will have its boots on, and it does take so much time to kind of disprove or debunk fake information or disinformation. It's a real challenge. Does that impact how you do your job in any way?
It would impact. I have to say, like maybe in the print press and maybe particularly in the Irish Times, we're slow to change the way anything is done. There's a very there can be a traditional way of doing things, which can be both good and bad. So I think in the media, we have sometimes been very slow to respond to disinformation and to adapt to kind of fight it. That's changing now to a certain extent. You see a lot more kind of fact checks appearing online from various outlets. You'll see more reactive debunking of information. So, I mean, just to go back to that George in Kent show thing, you, instead of just ignoring the disinformation, we worked on articles debunking it point by point in the hope that they would go some way towards, pushing the disinformation out of the way. Now, how well that worked, I don't know. But so there is more work going into debunking. Probably more again could be done. But I also wonder, and this is just a thought that occurred to me yesterday as I was preparing for this. Newspapers are increasingly behind paywalls, and that has been seen as quite a big success. It's seen as the future, as in when you log into the Irish Times or nearly any other newspaper nowadays, you'll be allowed to read a certain amount of articles, and then you will be asked to subscribe or pay before you can read any more. And that's all well and good, and that pays all of our wages and puts food on the table. But it also leaves a space for disinformation to spread, because the websites that spread false information and extremely partisan information are always going to remain free. So they're always going to get more readers than, the Irish Times or the Irish Independent or whoever. So you're kind of leaving this massive space there. So I do wonder as well whether that's something that the media needs to consider. Now, these are decisions way above my pay grade, thankfully. But, I know the Irish Times does a program where students, third level students, get free subscriptions. I wonder if there's a way of even broadening that out to more young people in secondary school, and even maybe up to 25 or something like that, to get them into the habit of referring to trusted news sites rather than just anything else on the internet. And I should also say though, it'd be really unfair just to demonize young people in this. The biggest culprits for spreading false information in my mind in recent years has been actually older generations. So when we talk about media literacy, and I think Elaine mentioned it in her keynote, it has to be a whole of society thing. And, young people need to be teaching their parents, as the two girls were saying, how to evaluate information and how to find trusted sources, as well as, young people need to learn that themselves.
Yeah, I think that's a key point, the issue of trust. And one of the really insidious things about disinformation is disinformation only needs to sow a seed of doubt. And, whereas trusted information has to work really hard to maintain the level of trust that they have with their readers or viewers or whoever it is. And to pick up on your point there about when content is behind paywalls and some people may not see the value of paying for news or paying for content. And I think there is an element of media literacy there as well. And this does pick up on Eileen's point about media literacy building a better future, because a key part of media literacy is helping people understand how the media works, how it's structured, how it's paid for, how it functions, how editorial processes work. And the idea is if you understand that, then you're in a much better position to be able to make an informed choice about what content you might be prepared to pay for and what content you might not be prepared to pay for. So it is an interesting one. A question I have for you, Conor, is do you think that journalists have any kind of specific role in terms of promoting media literacy? And if you do, then what kind of role is there something journalists could be doing to support it?
I think we have a role, a limited role. I think, the best people to teach media literacy are teachers in the classroom, events like this, and it's discussions that are best had, in a school or education setting as part of, kind of a civics class, the CSPE or whatever the acronym for that class is nowadays. I think when journalists can contribute to that, it's great. But I mean, I'm not sure journalists are too effective in promoting media literacy in a general sense, because we have a vested interest. We want to keep our jobs. We want our newspapers and our media outlets to keep going. So if I'm out here saying, guys, you should only trust the Irish Times, or you should only trust, established newspapers, people are going to be looking at me saying, yeah, that's all well and good, but sure, you would say that, which is fair enough, So I think journalists though do have a role. And as you said, being more transparent about how the process works could be very beneficial. Before the pandemic, we would have transition your classes into the paper on a very regular basis, and they would, they'd walk them through the whole process, and they'd sit in on meetings and everything. It was brilliant. More things like that could be great. I think more explanation, and this is something that we could all do better, probably, is more explanation of how you came to your story. So who your sources are, if you're not naming your sources, why specifically are you not naming your sources? There can be an over-reliance sometimes on anonymous sources. In my area of crime, we use anonymous sources a lot, just because of the nature of the job. Gardaí traditionally can't speak on the record about things, so we're forced to. But I think we should explain it more, because just a story based on anonymous sources completely, I feel, is a lot weaker than a story where you can actually name someone. But if you do have to refer to anonymous sources, explain why they are anonymous. And just more, when we get things wrong as well, holding up our hands, because everyone's going to get things wrong. It's about how you respond to it. So if you get things wrong, being quick to clarify it, being quick to own up to your mistake, being quick to apologize, obviously, and being quick to just show how you will not get it wrong in the future.
That's all solid advice, Conor. Thank you very much. Vicki, I'm conscious of time, and I knew 45 minutes would fly, so we'll move on to Vicki now. Vicki, from your perspective as a teacher, how concerned do you think teachers are about the issue of disinformation?
Good morning, everyone. I'd just like to say thank you to Joanna and Fiona. Now, that was really, really super. And I love the sheep idea as well. I think that's something we could all bring into our classrooms. From a teacher perspective, I think fake news has really crept into the classroom. Disinformation has crept into the classroom. And research shows that more than a third of teachers are now seeing this kind of disinformation that has been found online being cited in student work and being used in student discussions in the classroom. So it's quite a disturbing trend. And given now that, especially after 2 bouts of online learning in the last 12 months, we are more reliant than ever on technology in the classroom, on educational technology. Yet many students, I think, still lack the digital literacy necessary to really identify false information. And I would very much agree with the girls when they said that starting a program maybe in transition year, for example, on media literacy or media disinformation is almost too late. You know, that we have to be starting at a much earlier age. I have a 9-year-old daughter, and she's busy at the moment while we're doing this, texting me from the train down to Cork to see her granddad, and you know, she's making TikToks and posting them and to me, and I think, my goodness, you know, she's age 9, so I would really like to see this being grabbed right from primary school all the way through secondary school. I think there's quite a good organization in the States. They're called Common Sense Media. It's a non-profit organization, and they are working to provide kind of trustworthy information for parents and for students. But they did a survey which was relatively recent and very interesting, and that survey said that 44% of young people teenagers believe they can tell the difference between disinformation or even just misinformation and true stories, yet 30% of those admitted to sharing stories online, and everybody has touched on that this morning. Something that makes you react emotionally. You want to believe it, and therefore you think it's true. So it is having a huge impact, in my opinion, in the classroom.
True. We all, you know, and I think we definitely saw that in during the pandemic and in a time of kind of uncertainty and fear, and it's those kind of emotions that are really, really powerful. In your opinion, or have you seen any evidence of the rise of mis or disinformation having an impact on how students engaged with the curriculum or with content in the classroom?
I think what I would be concerned about, and I'm sure Conor probably has a similar view, is that you would almost lose trust, or that students would almost lose trust in what is an authoritative source. That trust is being undermined in the classroom, so they don't know where to go to get good information, to get accurate, true information. And I think that's where we come in, and Conor mentioned it, and he's absolutely right. You know, it needs to be approached in every classroom, in every subject. Where I feel quite strongly is that it's not just taught in isolation. And there are super programs that are available. So there is a whole junior cycle short course on digital media literacy, which is really super. There are brilliant resources from the likes of WebWise, who are running the workshop here today. They are fantastic. The Press Pass workshop today, again, that's another super idea, but it's all aimed at maybe just being taught in isolation, where I think this really needs to be something that we're doing in every class. So we have to develop, we have to help our students become informed citizens, digital citizens. And I think that is has been touched on this morning as to how you might do that, but something as simple as being able to identify red flags when you're looking at something. If you're reading something and the headline is full of exclamation marks and it's in bold type, then you might question whether that is just sensationalist or whether it's going to be true. The way we might look at that in class, for example, in my classroom, is we might do a poll. We might have everybody looking at an article and we might say, right, okay, we're going to have a vote. Do you think this is disinformation? Do you think this is accurate? And then you can discuss why, but that needs to be done on a regular basis. You encourage questioning, I think, as well. You get students to really engage with fact checkers and making sure that they don't automatically assume that the information they have is true, even if it comes from friends or family. In fact, maybe even especially, because if somebody passes it on to you, it doesn't mean it's true. It just means that they maybe would like it to be true. We talked about images earlier. I think the girls were mentioning images earlier, not assuming that every image is genuine. So again, something I might do in the classroom is, we have so much technology available to us now, and so much technology that you can edit images with, that you might say to students, okay, I want you to take an image and I want you to edit it just slightly, and I want you to bring it back to class and show everybody and pass it off as something that is real, and just to get them thinking, oh my goodness, that was a very small change, but now it's fake. It's no longer real. Being aware of bias, sharing your stories in classroom is really important, and that idea of gauging your emotional reaction. So there's a lot that we could do. But I think the biggest thing, and definitely Eileen mentioned this very clearly in her keynote speech, is that we support open and collaborative learning environments, that we've got diversity in our classrooms, that we've got questioning in our classrooms, that we have discussion communities, and that we have a really broad kind of cross-curricular approach to media disinformation and also to media literacy.
Yeah, all very fair points. Just while you were speaking there, it reminded me of a quote I heard recently about media literacy, and that media literacy, or certainly part of media literacy, was developing the skill to be skeptical about information content, but not to become cynical, because that's when you kind of start to run into difficulties. And we've heard that the development of critical thinking skills is part, but only part, of the solution to the misinformation crisis. It's absolutely not a silver bullet. And you were talking about some really good examples of resources there, and I'm just interested do you think there are enough resources available and support available to teachers in this area, especially in relation to developing those critical thinking skills?
Yes, I mean, I think they are ever increasing. So, WebWise is a fantastic source because they have it, it's not just their own resources, but they have links to other resources that you can use in your classroom. I suppose my feeling would just be that we as teachers, we need to be doing this on an ongoing basis and not in isolation. And I think we're quite reliant on technology now, particularly in the last 12 months. And you might almost want to take a technology detox approach in the classroom now and again. And that way, then you're cultivating judgment and perspective in your students when you're not always relying on the technology, when you're relying on teasing out ideas and discussion. So I think there could be more resources, most certainly, but I think those resources will come. And with the great work that students like Joanna and Fiona are doing, and getting that message out to their peers, that's the way to go about it, spreading the word. Absolutely fantastic. And so when we had Safer Internet Day, which I'm sure the girls were involved in, there are a lot of initiatives that come off the back of that, that allow students to make those judgments for themselves, and it becomes more of a whole school initiative. So I think word is spreading, and it will continue to do so.
Well, the idea of secondary school students working with primary school kids is getting support from the audience. There's a note in here to say, love the idea of secondary school students working with primary school kids. Teenagers are a wealth of knowledge on new digital apps and tools. Teachers and parents can learn a lot from them. So there's support for your idea, Joanna and Fiona. Vicki, we've been focused on misinformation and disinformation in this discussion, but I want to talk about media literacy in that broader sense for a minute. Eileen said that media literacy was a way to build a better future. And, it covers so many different areas that are of real importance for us at the moment. How well do you think media literacy as a concept in that broad sense is understood within schools? And if there's more work to be done there, what do you suggest?
It's at the moment, I think it is down to individual teachers. So this is purely a personal opinion, but I would like to see a situation where it becomes much more embedded in school culture. And there are schools who are doing wonderful work and who are real digital champions. And then there are other schools who aren't. And that's not to make any judgment against those schools. It's just the way things are. I think it was Emma actually, when she was talking about launching the eTwinning report, was talking about how eTwinning, has been maybe a bit of a slow burn because teachers find that they just don't have time to do it. And time will come up over and over again whenever you are trying to introduce new initiatives like that. People feel that there's no time in an already very hectic schedule to do this. So being involved with eTwinning and being involved with EPAS, with the European Ambassador School Programme, has been a really good way for me to introduce media literacy into this room, because with every eTwinning by its very nature is online, and therefore students are we are all obliged as part of an project to make them aware of dangers of online or of net safety, let's say. But also I think just by the nature of the way they're working and collaborating with their peers in other countries, they are automatically getting a broader perspective, a wider view of a situation, and getting outside of their bubble in school and learning how to make judgment and have a broader perspective. So projects like this are absolutely the way forward.
Good stuff. Okay, thank you very much. Eileen also noted, she quoted Paul Mahalladay's and his description of media literacy as about preparing young people for lives of active inquiry around media. And, it just made me think, where are young people developing those skills? Is it in school? Is it among themselves? And again, coming back to this idea that disinformation is a whole of society problem. What should we be collectively doing? Because I think your point about teachers and the time pressure that teachers are under, and whenever we think about young people, we think, oh, well, we'll fix that through the schools and we'll just push that out through the schools, but there is a limited resource there as well. So, in terms of trying to become more creative about how we approach this, I'm just wondering if you've got any thoughts on that.
Well, I think these kind of projects, as I said, that's where I would be aiming students, that everybody, and the beauty of eTwinning is that it goes right from primary all the way up, and so that you can add an element of media literacy to any kind of a project that you're working on. But I would be really interested to hear from Joanna and Fiona where they think that they are learning, because from the other side of the fence, how they feel that it's being taught in schools. I think that would be very interesting to hear.
Good. We're almost out of time. Thank you very much for your questions. I'm going to open it up for the last couple of minutes, just if any of you have any final comments. And maybe Fiona and Joanna, if you've got a response to Vicki there as well. So do you have any thoughts on Vicki's last point there about, where do you feel you're getting most of your kind of media literacy information or training from?
Sorry,
Joanna, there you go.
Yeah, sorry. I think really just programs in school, like, workshops, WebWise has been absolutely great this year. Like, we've learned so much in the past year just from even just bringing it up in conversation, just having a conversation about it. because it's not a topic that's avoided, but like it's not a priority in a lot of people's heads. So just even bringing it up in conversation, talking about it in classes, like there's so many things that you can do, but I really think just having conversations about it, that's the best thing that you can do. Because you learn from other people, like you learn from your friends, teachers, everyone. So just talking about it is really the best way, I think, to spread awareness and to learn about it.
Great stuff. Thank you very much, Joanna. Conor, do you have any closing comments there? Anything you want to add?
I suppose just one thing that occurred to me while I was listening to the girls is the spread of misinformation on social media apps that we don't use. So when I was in college, we just about had Bebo, which should be ancient history at this stage. Then we had Facebook. Then, as I got older, the apps seemed to be getting stranger and stranger. So now it's, Instagram, then Snapchat, then TikTok, and I'd be one of the younger people maybe in my workplace, but, don't use them and don't know how to use them. So I worry about the misinformation that's spread without us even seeing it. So I think that's just from the point of view of a journalist, that's something that we need to educate ourselves better about as well. So maybe we should be taking some lessons from Fiona and Joanna as well.
Okay. Thanks very much, Conor. It sounds like Fiona and Joanna are going to have a lot of work ahead of them. I think we're all looking for guidance. And based on their development of the sheep model, I think we're in safe hands there. Vicki, have you any closing comments just before we close off the discussion for the day?
No, I think I completely agree with the girls that opening a space that is safe for discussion on this and making sure that, again, that it's not just something you do to tick a box, that it's not just, okay, we've talked about media literacy and disinformation, that it's an ongoing conversation. That's the most important thing you can do to keep it in always at the very top of people's consciousness.
Yeah, I think so. The only thing left for me to say, I think, is a sincere thank you. Thank you for it was so good to get the three different perspectives here this morning. So sincere thanks to you all for your great contributions. And I think we are finishing up 90 seconds early, but I'm sure John won't mind because you're all going to get prepared now to go into your workshops. Which are going to be excellent. So thank you all very much, and I will hand back to John now.
Thank you so much there to Martina Chapman for moderating our panel discussion. Such an interesting discussion. It's been great to hear the range of perspectives from all our different panelists. So thanks again to everyone who participated in the conversation. So thanks to Martina Chapman, Victoria Malcolm, Joanna Ellen, Fiona Brosnan, and Conor Gallagher.